Yeah, and welcome. So right off the bat, if you're a subscriber, make sure to click the bell button next to the subscribe button. That's the new way to get notified when the newest videos come out. So make sure you do that. If you're not a subscriber, join the club, join the party. There's tons of people here. Why not be part of the fun? Hit the subscribe button. That would be awesome. So today's lesson is we're going to go over different chord shapes. We're going to use a G chord as our example, and we're going to use the G major scale, but we're going to learn how to target the G chord inversions inside of that scale. Now, what does that mean? It means you're going to learn how to be melodic, and it's not that hard, and it will revolutionize your playing because it's a super simple trick, but once you get the hang of it, it's like, where was that my whole guitar career or life? So let's learn some tricks and zoom in for a closer look. All right, so check this out. We're going to use a G chord. Now, there's 3 different shapes that I like to use from. It's based on the cage system. If you've never heard of that, by all means, do yourself the biggest favor you've ever done in your guitar playing and look at the cage system. It completely opens up the fretboard. I'm going to do a video or a series on the cage system soon, so if you haven't heard of it, check it out, and then this will go over some of those shapes. So, G, right? Typical G power chord. When it's the 6th string down, right? When you're playing all 6 strings, it's known as the E shape, okay? Because think of an E major chord, right? But you got to move your little movable capo here. It's your root note, but that chord shape is based off of an E chord. Now, a couple frets up from that shape, right, is going to be this. Now this, again, is the kind of movable capo thing. It's this right here, this shape. Those 3 notes look like a D chord, but the notes underneath your fingers actually spell a G chord, okay? So you got, and then you have the A string down. Think of an A chord, right? If I did the chord like this, right? A chord, or like this, right? This is the A shape. And we're going to work off that shape as well. Now, the positions that these chords fall in, right? I like using the back side of this chord. So in this instance, it would be position 3 of major pentatonic. Okay, so that's going to be off of the E shape. And it's an easy way to target the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, right? You get the root, the 5th, and the 3rd. So that little lick right there right, we're really hammering all of these notes, and this is our G chord. So when you start to really pay attention to the chord tones, right, that's the G note. It's really easy to become melodic. 5th of the chord, we started on the 5th. But I've really paid attention to 2 of the chord tones, right? So I'm using that scale, but the purpose of the scale is to kind of show me what the potentials are, but the scale doesn't really start to come into a practical way of being melodic until you see the chord shapes inside of it. That's when the scale's like, oh my gosh. So when you combine the chord shapes with the scale, that's the magic. Scale by itself, it's just a good way to wander in the desert and hope you hit the right note. Hope there's some water somewhere and it's not just a mirage, and typically they're mirage riffs. So learn the chord shapes. Okay, so even that little simple riff based off of this chord shape, 5th fret, 7th fret, right? 5th, root. Okay, and so we've hit a lot of the chord tones already. See how it really has that G sound, right? This is perfect for, you know, country and southern rock, any kind of rock, really. But, you know, that sound really is great for that melodic pentatonic playing. Okay, so the second shape is right in between the third of G major pentatonic, right? This is the third position. Okay, we're targeting this, and it's also between the 4th position. Okay, now I typically like to think of this shape located in the 4th position. I do a lot of riffs out of the 4th position. So I like to think of it, you know, in that spot, even though it does share notes of the 3rd position as well. Now, some of those licks you can use, right, kind of a Hendrixy double stop. Make that D shape, but we're only going to concentrate on the G 7th fret and the B 8th, and then we're going to hammer on G9. Right? Pull off, and then roll this first finger over to the D string. Right? And you're hammering this, you know, chord tone. Your root's always going to be on the D shapes, is always going to be on the B string. Okay? This is your 3rd, this is your 5th. So you got. So if we wanted to do that, okay, it's that just hammering on. You're hitting both of the strings, the G and the B. Pull off, and then roll over. Now we're back and we're hitting the root again of that first shape that we were going over, the E shape. We're back into there, okay? Hit the 5th. Okay, but both of these licks are totally centered around the thinking of the chord and not the scale. We're really paying attention to hitting the G chord tones rather than just fumbling through the scale, okay? Okay, now the other position, and I'll go over more examples. The other position is this A chord. Now, the notes we're concentrating on are, okay? So you have your root, your 5th, and your 3rd. It sounds like taps. So sad. Okay, so anyways, when you're here, you can really hammer. I mean, you can use that 5th position. Right? Here, I typically do licks like that. So I'll slide into the 10th fret to the 12th fret on the B, getting me to my 3rd of the chord. And then I'll go E10, E12, and then roll over. And then I'll do a quick slide. Right? Now this movement right here gets me from the 3rd to the root in this chord. Now, something to keep in mind too is when you bend notes, right, like this one, you're bending into the 3rd of that chord. So don't just think of, having to hit the note stationary. a lot of times the coolest sounding stuff is when you bend into the chord tones, right? And it gets at that really cool, you know. Right now, I go outside of the scale a little bit too. That's another thing that's cool to pay attention to. If you haven't explored the modes and you're kind of intimidated by the modes, when you start to see the chord shapes in the scales, right, you're actually paying attention to all of the notes, you'll find that sometimes, like if you take this chord for instance, well, I'm lying. Never mind. Never mind what I was going to say. Doesn't apply in this video. It starts to apply when you start to put more chords into the progression. But my point being, and there's, you know, like I said, down below there's a website and all that stuff, and it goes over how to think about the scales and the chord progressions together. But you start to see how the modes are created. The modes are created by not only a scale, but the chords that are in the progression, right? So you can start to use a simple scale like the pentatonic scale, and then you start to, when you can see the chords of the progression inside those scales, you'll start to find, oh, there's other notes that aren't in my pentatonic scale. What are these? And depending on what the chord progression is, you'll start to see the modes. Now, you won't be calling it the Dorian or the whatever, but you'll be seeing, oh, you know, there's this minor chord here. That's not in my pentatonic scale. What is that from? That starts to make the modes, right? And so what's been really helpful for a lot of my students is to approach it that way, to see the chords, you know, in a pentatonic scale, and that allows you to not only start to build the modes, but understand why those modes work and what notes to hit, because again, you're not just learning a scale, you're paying attention to the chord tones, the notes of the chords, and that lets you play the modes better too. Okay, so we can do licks like that. Look for those. That's a perfect example. If we went, you know, you see this, right, kind of sus move that's super common in, you know, all sorts of pop, country, just songs in general. You can think of those moves too. Right, if I wanted to do a G sus4, I can add that note. Now I can add, my scale goes like this, but I can, right, or when I start to know that, oh, that sus chord allows this note to come into play, I can start tailoring my riffs around that. Right, the scale is, but if you get, right, you start to get cool stuff like that. You can do the, that's really hammering this, you know, G chord, this D shape. So we're going 7, 9, 8, 10, 8, slide down to 7. Back down the scale, and then I'm going to slide and then land on my root. Now, there's all sorts of licks that'll start to appear. One of the ways to really help become melodic is don't just play the scales up and down, right? And what I mean is like that. Think of all those spots where you can roll your finger over. Right? So I'm doing what I call stacking, but the notes right on top of each other. That's another way to really make your playing a lot more melodic. Right? I do it all the time. Right? And so it's not just, it's sometimes it's rolling, right? Where we go? This way. So it's not always on this finger. Sometimes it's rolling over that way. Right? But always keeping in mind those chord tones. Back into my chord. Here. Another chord tone. I rolled over, right? I was able to go from my root to my fifth. Here. You can do that. So I'd have my third and my root. So it's the chord shapes. Again, it's the E. So you have... Okay, you have that one. You have the D, which is in between 3 and 4. And then you have the A shape, which is in position 5. All of those licks right there were totally centered around those G shapes. And that is what is going to make your playing melodic. Yes! Way to go. See? It makes a little more sense now. You know, becoming melodic is all about the chord shapes, right? We get hung up on the scale. Forget the scale. Pay attention to the chords. Now, you need to know both. That would be awesome. Now, again, click the bell button if you want to be notified when the new videos are posted. I try to post frequently, so if you want to know when every video comes out, click that bell button. That would be awesome. If you like what you see, by all means, a great way of saying thank you is to share the videos. Post them far and wide, Facebook, wherever you want. That would be sick. You guys are awesome. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want more instruction, click down below. There's a website. There's courses. You know, lots of them are like freaking 9 hours long. So check those out as well. That supports the cause and makes the free videos possible. Thank you so much for watching. You guys are amazing. We'll catch you next time.